And I want to invite Mark, our audience participant here, to make, to react to what we're saying. And there's a particular question I wanted to ask him. Mark has really been at the forefront in getting the government to apply principles of behavioral economics to retirement problems. And he's done it in many, many areas, most notably in the defined contribution area. And a lot of what Mark has described the effort as being as taking defined contribution plans and driving them towards doing a lot of the things that defined benefit plans have done in the past. And what strikes me about the proposals that we've been talking about here, and a lot of what we've been talking about on the panel, is sort of a drive in the opposite direction, which is taking defined benefit plans and driving them in the direction of defined contribution plans. And as somebody who spent a lot of time thinking about driving across these lines, these sort of artificial legal lines that we draw between different types of retirement plans, Mark, what your reaction is to what we've been talking about. And feel free to stand up.
That's all right. Thank you, Richard. First, congratulations to you and Robert and your partners at Covington, Karen and Karen, Pension Rights Center, Jean and Pamela at Urban. This is a great way to put creative ideas together. I think the way you've organized this panel in particular, and the other two, as I understand them, is very thoughtful and will help move the ball forward. This is, I think, in terms of creative ideas, an embarrassment of riches. You're appropriately bringing in, Richard, the DB-ification of the DC plan, really of the 401k, in this discussion, because we're talking about breaking down the thought barriers, the conceptual barriers generally, not just thinking DBs and DCs to mix attributes of the two in creative ways and in ways that might be more effective, which it's the same effort. You're exactly right, whether you start from the traditional DB side or you start from the traditional 401k model, what's become a traditional 401k model. We need to get past those barriers and those fixed ideas about what the plans need to be. Some of them are fixed in the statute, so we can't always get past them in regulatory interpretations. We can go so far, but not past the statutory bounds, but we need to think about changing the legislation, obviously, in order to have more flexible approaches and potentially also, to Josh, to your point, more flexible ways to explore pilot projects, ways to do research, whether it's in the behavioral economics area or the kinds of experimentation that would help us do proof of concept for these really intriguing ideas and others. If we can get together and have an effort to focus on process, how can we make it safe to experiment more, to explore these ideas in concrete ways? We've got limited ways now. If you're lucky enough and credible enough to get foundation support, you can sometimes do a pilot project or have this kind of discussion or other kind of financial backing, but that only goes so far. And so I would invite us to all think together about the process for translating terrifically interesting ideas such as these and others that you'll be talking about later today into evidence, trying them out on an evidence-based methodological basis so that we can move, move things forward in based on more than an intuitive sense of what's likely to work or get support. because time is short, I won't comment on the specific projects other than proposals, other than to say that I'm precluded from commenting on the portfolio cash balance because it's involved in pending regulations. And by the way, Richard, as you well know, those regulations are not, when they become final, not my regulations personally any more than the PBGC guarantee is Josh's personal liability or that of him and his staff. That's not collectivizing it all that much.
Mark, this is a conference about ideas, not,
That's right.
we've been prescribed from talking about code section.
Right. And I think that that this is just the right way to talk about the ideas, that you're focusing not just on breaking down the barriers between DB and DC, but on the underlying concepts of bearing of financial risks and allocation of resources, and whether the evolution of the system away from collective risk sharing, be it employer or, to Damon's point, government, trade union, charitable religious organization, the evolution of our system away from that and the unfortunate effects of going to a every person for themselves system without the ability of the individual to enlist collective risk bearing and risk management and professional assistance, that's where we ought to be focusing, whether the risk sharing or collective management is through the medium of a pension plan, a trade union, an employer, an insurance company, voluntary, charitable, civic, religious, academic, other association, or other means, potentially including government or not, is the sort of interesting part that we're all getting involved in. That Dutch model that, Karen, that you're borrowing a leaf from has always been fascinating to me as well, and I know to others, so I think that's a great direction to explore. The Chiron plan, likewise, a very creative idea, and Treasury's been giving technical assistance to the UFCW and Chiron as the developers of that, because we think it's promising. And the POP is something that the conversation on coverage very thoughtfully developed, and the conversation itself is something that Karen, I think, still should be taking great credit for as another source of ideas. So I'll close by inviting folks to be creative also about the process through which we can liberate ourselves a little bit from the challenges of coming up with ideas, and then the challenges of taking the ideas we come up with and testing them out, trying them out in order to bring them to fruition.
Thank you very much, Mark. We have got not just a room full of panelists here that are extremely knowledgeable and talented, but a room full of people who are quite expert in this. And we have, no. I think we're fine. I mean, nope. Yeah. We have 10 minutes. Yes, good. You scare me there, Norm. Either we're on different watches. Anyways, I invite people, if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say to, perk up. Hopefully, I feel sorry for you having to sit there and just listen to all of us talking for this time. So, reporters, yes. Tom, read.
I just wanted to point out, I missed the first couple of minutes of Gene's intro. I apologize for that, so maybe I missed this one point. I thought Michael was going to get close to it when he talked about $6 trillion. Damon was going to get close to it when he talked about money. And even Josh was going to get close to it when he talked about complexity. We went an hour and 40 minutes without using the word tax. And I applaud you for doing it, but let that be a segue for the next panel, because you're not going to be talking about increasing coverage without some kind of cost to the FISC
Let me make one observation. And, the next panel really is focused on expanding coverage and retirement income. I view this panel as whatever the level of dollars that we have to work with, deploying them most efficiently. And I think that's a lot of what Mark was talking about. And Mark, you?
Wasn't a criticism.
Well, no, it's part of the reality, though, that one of the things that retirement security competes with is the government's revenue. And I think that that has been a consistent element over the past 30 years, and I think we're going to have to come to terms with it. I mean, basically what you're saying is that you're raising a question is whether we can actually afford to meet that Michael Krebs' $6.5 trillion deficit, and whether we can do it on a tax-favored basis.
I just want to say that that was exactly what I was alluding to when I made a plea for a little bit more regulatory certainty. Without regard to even rearranging the tax system, perhaps not returning to an era of the 80s where every 2 years, for tax reasons, we reduce what employers can do and we change the rules for plans. That in itself would be a little bit more helpful in encouraging employers to take more steps.
I think that well, first, I raised the issue of expanding Social Security, which would involve taxes. And I assumed everyone knew that, so I didn't mention the word tax. But all the proposals on this table, right, are proposals for essentially voluntary arrangements between employers, employees, and potentially third-party benefit plan organizations. But they have tax consequences because the tax subsidy for retirement plans is immense, right? And perhaps the question that you're raising is, if we were going to think about trying to do this seriously as a matter of public policy, to try to essentially, on a more or less universal basis, drive coverage in the way that they do in the Netherlands and Australia and Switzerland and so on and so forth, that there would be that the tax system would have to be changed in order to do that. Because the reality is that the way the tax system works right now drives what Mark was talking about. It's basically set up to drive a you're-on-your-own process, and it pushes an incredibly inefficient system, an ineffective system for providing retirement security. Now, and I think that what that tells us is not, the question is not, can we afford retirement security? It's, can we afford to continue not providing retirement security in the extraordinarily fiscally expensive way we do it now?
And I think, Tom, that's how I think about this panel. Again, the next panel is about coverage and adequacy. This panel is about the efficiency of the arrangements. And I think that translates into tax efficiency as well.
Can I just make one point on this one,
Sure.
too? The cost, and this is building on what Damon just said, the cost of not providing retirement security, the cost of elder poverty is high. It puts a strain on our social safety net. It puts a strain on non-governmental programs. We still have a very robust faith community that provides services to folks who are elderly and can't meet their basic needs. Failing to help middle-class families get to a point when they can pay for themselves and be independent in retirement has very real costs, and just looking at the tax expenditure is only a piece of that, and it's a small piece. It's an important piece, but it's just a piece of the picture. When we evaluate this, we need to look at not only the cost to the fisc and the cost to employers, but also the cost to society for not providing retirement security to people.
Yeah. When I was at the Treasury Department, we refer to this as tax efficiency. If there is a tax subsidy for something, you want to make sure that it's buying as much of it as possible, and that as little of it is being wasted. And I think Mark and our panelists here, the presenters, I mean, the idea is how do we get the dollars that we spend on retirement to actually deliver the most bang for the buck in terms of retirement benefits? Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Identify yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Goss from Social Security, and have a specific question on exactly what Richard just mentioned about using most efficiently the money that we've got. And I'm not going to talk about Social Security, but in the area that Josh was talking about private pensions. We've kind of like lost a lot of one of the second legs of the stool, DB pensions. They've kind of withered away. And I guess the question is why. Josh, you alluded to ERISA and all the requirements, all the regulations. And one of the regulations that sort of sticks to me as an actuary, where I think actuaries have maybe kind of dropped the ball a bit, is, and I'm hoping you all will speak to this, is the requirement for funding standards and market value funding. And it basically has created, I think, this situation when the economy is doing really well, companies are doing really well, they have lots of money, and guess what? Their portfolios are doing really well too. So the market valuation of their portfolios looks really good. The actuaries come along and say, you are overfunded, so you get a holiday. This is just when your company is doing the very best and can afford to probably put a few extra bucks on the table, and we say, you don't have to put any extra money on the table. This is wonderful, great for profits. But then when we go in cycles, which the economy occasionally does, then and when we're at a down cycle, that's when, of course, the market valuation of the portfolio doesn't look quite so good. And that's when, of course, we come along and say, gee, now you have to put more money on the table. But that's exactly the time when the companies are not doing so well and don't have the excess money to put on the table. So our funding standards, and there are good reasons why we've done this. I know we're worried about having, excess funds in the good times and people try to dissolve the plans. But by doing this, hadn't we set up a situation where we've made it not only difficult, but almost impossible for employers to embrace DB pensions? And I know there are lots of other regulations, but this one strikes me as being a really big one that has really hurt.
You know what I would love to do is to leave that as a pregnant question that we put on hold during the coffee break, because I don't want to be accused by my fellow moderators and panelists that are to come of depriving them of time. Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate that. And we'll take a 15-minute break and then come back for that panel we kept, everybody seemed to want to talk about so much.